Hello. So I want to give you a quick overview about the direction that I'm taking with the wireframes for the application. So first, I'm going to point out a couple of things that I noticed, first impressions and things that I thought about after understanding how this application works and who is the intended user for it. So first, everything's pretty straightforward. It's the list of active quotes. Uh, I was wondering what are these buttons, so then I need to hover over those so I can find out which are important. I didn't like the fact that we were expecting the user to understand what those icons mean, so it is always good to have the labels. These options over here, I think that's pretty clean. I mean, overall, everything's pretty clean, but then when I understood what are the purpose for these functions over here, these actions over here, then I understood that it is mostly going to be used heavily when you first set up the account. Once you set up the account, the imports, the quote roles, quote tags, all that most likely are not going to change that often. Hopefully you're going to have a lot of new clients, so that might change every week, hopefully, because we're having more clients. But other than that, I don't think that this is going to be heavily used. However, it is in a very prominent position as it is important for the daily use. And then once I selected the quote, I see a lot of information, which is good. But now when I'm creating the quote, my mind it just focused on the quote. So again, this becomes more noise to me because it's more a distraction that most likely I don't need it. So I felt like we can make a better use of that space and putting that in a somewhere that is accessible, but it's not in your face every day because it's not going to be used. Most likely, it's not going to be used every day. So giving those point outs, I started doing the wireframe. So let me show you how I started. So here it's the attempt to the wireframe. Remember, this is not the final layout. This is just organizing the content architecture in a way that it's more user-friendly. As you can see, everything, the navigation is pretty straightforward. You have the tabs for active quotes and past quotes. Then you have the filters, so you want to see all the quotes by quote status. The quote status is something that I think might be useful. Like for example, when I come here and I see these quotes, I have little understanding which quotes are ready to go or which quotes are kind of halfway through the process. So right now looking at the list, I don't know which one needs to be completed. And then the last edited and date created, yeah, that's nice information, but it's not actionable for me. Like for example, if I log in on a Monday morning after the long weekend and I come here to my dashboard, it is hard for me to remember which are the quotes that need my most attention because are the most urgent. And that is why I changed a little bit the columns in there. Let me go over it. So now I included here the target date. That is a question that is already been asked on the form. Like for example, if I see quotes and discover the definition, this target quote completion. I think that that is important to keep people accountable for the quote, for the deadline. So if you have a date that's target for the quote, then we should also include it on this column over here because that's going to create the sense of urgency. Oh, I can see that it's due in 2 days or this week. So at least it's easier for me to be more accountable because I know which quotes need my immediate attention. And also, in addition to the target date, I also included a column which we can discuss, but I think that's going to be useful because at the moment I don't know exactly what it's going to be considered a completed versus a draft quote, but at least I can easily see which are the quotes that are completed and which one are the draft. So that means that I should be able to focus first on the draft to make sure that I complete those quotes. That is why we also have this filter that you can filter by quote status. So if I want to only see the draft quotes, I select draft quotes, which allow me to focus only on those quotes that need to be completed. So that way I can easily ignore everything else. So again, I'm trying to make this in a way that it's more useful for somebody that is going to be working this day in, day out. And when they come here, it's easy for them to know exactly what's going to be the next action that they need to take. And I think this new structure of the column, it helps on that. You can search for the candidate or search for clients or target dates, quote name. You can even filter by project status. I think that that's another important feature to have outside, because if I see that project status is already ready to go, but my quote is not ready, so then again, it creates more sense of urgency for the user that is in charge of creating these quotes. And so yeah, so I think that this is pretty clean. Now all this navigation that I mentioned at the beginning, all these parts over here, it's going to be accessible through here. So here it's going to be easy access. Most likely people are going to be using this every day just to log out, so that's why I put at the bottom and stand out, so they don't have to scan, so they can easily pinpoint where to log out. But in order to use that, they're going to see that all the options are there every single day, so when they need it, they already know where to find it, because that they've seen every time that they go to log out. So the logout is going to stand out because most likely they're going to be using that every single day, but at least they can easily see all the options in there. I kept the same iconography. It is from material design from Google, so I think it's very appropriate. So most likely I didn't need to change any of that, but I think the placement, it's easier now. It's not in your face. It is not taking space from the main space to work, and it's easy access. Now we also have some actions. So let's say, for example, when you can delete the quote from here, and also when you are inside, you can also export the quote or copy the quote, which I think is going to be like a duplicate. But what if I, on the outside, I know that this quote is completed and it's ready for me to upload, or it's ready for me to duplicate? So why do I need to go inside to have these options? So then I thought that here in these actions here, we can have the export immediately for that line. Export, duplicate, archive, or delete. So we can discuss about these options, what's more reasonable, but I think those are the appropriate actions for each individual quote without having the need to go inside of the quote. Now, if I want to create a quote, that's always accessible. It's pretty clean, that it's pretty straightforward, that this is to create a new quote. Now, this is the screen that I think is going to be the best one to create a new quote. It is super simple, and it's going to ask the questions that are the most important. Now, let me explain why I think these are the 4 key questions. First of all, it's going to be a super simple first impression, so it is not overwhelming with a bunch of fields. It's just the 4 main key questions that I want to ask: the project name, the client company, the target quote completion, so that's the deadline. So if I put it's going to be done in a month from now, I am accountable for that deadline. So we want to know from the get-go what is the target quote completion date. Also the project status. The reason that I think these are the most useful to start with, it is because if I click to start a quote and then I just go ahead and save, it is already recorded that new quote. So even with those 4 fields, I just created a quote and left, and now I can easily be accountable. Okay, I created this quote and it's a draft and the deadline is this date. So that way I can easily go back and complete that code that I started. Otherwise, it's gonna be just lost over here, because yes, I created this, but you don't have the context of the sense of urgency that the user should have. So going back here, so I create a new quote. These are the main questions, just to keep people accountable, and we have the minimum requirements just to create that record. Then we start the quote, and this is the idea that I have for the overall layout. So as you can see, it's a long page. Couple of cool things that I think is pretty user friendly. Let's see, for example, here, this summary I think is very useful information to have at any point of the quote creation, because specifically when you are in the project creation process over here, that you're adding the phases and the tasks and you're adding the hours, so all that calculation for the project summary is going to be being updated. So if I want to keep track of what's going on, I have to go back to the summary, and it gives me here. So I thought, well, if that's going to be important, then why we don't keep it outside of the form, because technically it is not part of the form. It is just kind of a summary of the result of the inputs that I entered on the form. So I put it outside so it's consistent every time that I'm working on the quote. Okay, so just to give you a quick overview about this page. The idea is, as you can see, I remove every navigation that is not relevant to the quote. For example, when I'm working on here, I have a lot of information, a lot of navigation that isn't relevant to the quote creation. And when somebody is going to create a quote, that's all they have on their mind. So everything on the screen should be in the context of quote creation. Everything that is unneeded, we can remove. So that's why that page, it looks pretty clean, because it's only focused on the quote. Every action, every button is related to the quote creation. And you can see the project summary over here. You have the time, the phases, the number of tickets, how many products, the cost and price, which is the same information that you have over here. But now it's more discrete and always on the top of the screen, so it doesn't get mixed between all the forms. Something that, because at the beginning, let me cancel this. So because we ask the project name and client company, when we start the new quote, it is already comes with the project name and the client company, which I think is a nice touch because we have both combined. I have here the quote and name, which is my test project, but as I go through it, I cannot lose track of the client's name. So things happen. I may get a phone call, I may go to the bathroom, somebody calls me out, but then I have to come back and I need to think, wait a minute, this quote for what? But having the client give that context for the project and the client. So I think it's a nice thing to have together as a headline. Now, when you start scrolling up in the screen, we need more real estate. So what I did is you keep this, I mean, this is just a wireframe, so that's why you see this all isn't going to happen at the end, but it's just to communicate that the header is going to reduce the size so we have more space for the actual form. And this is very beneficial. This layout is very beneficial, especially with the touchscreen. We have a lot of laptops that are touchscreens, so you can easily, we have a lot of laptops that have we can easily swipe up and swipe down without having to rely of going tab by tab or section by section. Instead, you can just keep scrolling up and down without having to lose the track of everything that is happening or the things that are missing. So you can either click the definitions, stakeholder, discovery, going back and forward, or you can scroll, or you can just use your finger when on those iPads or tablets or laptops with a touchscreen, so you can easily go up and down and just scroll and at a glance what it's missing and what it's not. The project status is on the side because that's important information that's going to be relevant. That's going to create, again, sense of urgency of how important it is because the project status is ready to go, or maybe we have more time because things happen, but it's all the information. So as you can see, all the actions, cancel, preview quote, and save, it's visible all the time there. So it doesn't matter where you at, it's there. And also we have the additional actions over here to export, duplicate, archive, and delete, which are the same that we have over here. So yes, I have not completed all the layouts. I went halfway through the process. I am still working on the discovery part, but I just wanted to give you a quick glance. I just wanted to give you a quick glance of the direction that I'm taking just to get your feedback, because I'm making a lot of assumptions. I'm making a lot of interpretations of how it's going to be used. So I want to make sure that I test the waters with you and get your feedback early in the process, just to make sure that I am going in the right direction. If not, we can correct it ahead of time. But overall, I think that this is a very good improvement on the overall layout. Something that I wanted to standardize, for example, it's some of the things like if we use these tabs over here, it's fine, but then we have another ones like it's rounded. So if we're gonna use elements or controls, then let's be consistent on how those controls look across all the different steps. So that's what I'm trying to communicate over here, in which, for example, this one over here matches this one over there. I'm not 100% convinced that this is the best or most efficient way to treat the stakeholders. I was just repeating the same functionality or controls that we were using over here, just for the sake of consistency. But again, this is just a wireframe. It's not the final design. It's just to make sure that everything it's on the right place. We can work on those components in a way that makes more sense, because yes, I am not convinced that this is the best way to list the stakeholders and their responsibility for each individual one. But again, I think that this is going to be a good enhancements, good directions, but I want to get your feedback first before I continue moving forward. All right, so I hope you like this direction, and so we'll discuss and make any revisions before we continue moving forward. Thank you.